Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Martine, and if you are new here, I do videos on Vedic Astrology with some tropical influences as well. I focus on both relationship and natal astrology, and if you like this video and you would like to see more content from me, please like, subscribe, hit the notifications bell. And if you're interested in a personal consultation, because I do consultations on a variety of subjects, please email me at the email address that I will leave in the video description. Thank you. So without further ado, I'm going to be talking today about a subject that I did mention that I was going to be talking about, and namely it is the subject of the Arudha Lagna. Not just the Arudha Lagna, but the difference between what you appear to the world, what you appear to be to the world, and what your soul is actually like on the inside. And in order to get into this, I'm going to start from the beginning with the Ascendant. I know I haven't done any videos on the Ascendant, but this is mostly because I thought it's not a particularly interesting topic because there's so much material online. But if you are interested in me making videos about ascendants, things to do with your personality, physical appearance, ascendant description in general, with examples as well of celebrities or famous people, please let me know in the comment section. I will consider it. But I will be talking about the ascendant from a theoretical point of view a little bit to explain the concept of the Arudha Lagna, and then I will be moving on to the topics of Atmakaraka, Amatyakaraka, and Karakamsha. But the overall subject of this video is going to be how come there is a difference, there is sometimes a huge difference between what a person appears to be and what they are really like on the inside. Now, I know that in tropical astrology, tropical astrologers, for instance, blame this, quote-unquote, entirely on the natal chart ascendant. You will see descriptions that say, the ascendant is what you appear to be to others, and that it's not the real you, it is just the image that you have in the world, which is actually not correct. The ascendant is you and is not you at the same time. The way that I have described the ascendant before, and the way that I like to think of it, is the ascendant is like the user interface. It's like the operating system on a PC or a laptop. So think of the soul or the inner you as, the machine. You're a machine, you function in machine language, and in order for you to communicate to the outside world, you need a user interface. So, or the other way around, the user needs an operating system to communicate to the machine. And this is what the ascendant is. It is the interface between you and the world. But not only that, the ascendant also governs your actual physical body, your physical appearance. I mean, I haven't gotten into this, but there's clear evidence to show that different planetary influences literally change physical appearance. If you take a lot of people who have the same ascendant or the same overall energies on the ascendant by aspects, by nakshatras, by all that, you will see similar patterns of not just behavior, but actual physical appearance, physical traits. Even, anything going from height to tendency to gain weight to, physical features, light, dark, what color your eyes are, what shape your eyes are, etc., etc. All of this is governed by the ascendant. And the ascendant is the physical path that the soul is walking on in this life, in this incarnation. And the Arudha Lagna is a point that is being calculated based on this ascendant. It's very simple to calculate, we'll explain in a bit. But for now, I'm just going to try to explain what Arudha Lagna is. Arudha Lagna is the illusion that you cast, quote unquote. So it's your shadow in the Maya, the world of illusion, the illusionary world, that kind of thing. And, and I've talked about this before, like the Indian sages thousands of years ago, they talked about the Maya, which is the illusion of the material world, and that basically it is something that the soul has to go through in order to learn things, in order to grow, and some souls are more attached to the material world than others. I also talked about this topic of Maya in the video I made about Rahu and Ketu, and how Rahu governs the Maya more, the material world, and Ketu governs the spirit world, quote unquote, including things like demons and angels and all that stuff for people who believe in this. And just all things spiritual are ruled by Ketu. Things that, the eye cannot see and all that stuff. And, right, the Arudha Lagna. So the Arudha Lagna does influence you all the time, even though it is an illusionary projection of who you really are. People will react to this illusionary projection. So think about it this way. The way that people react to you, respond to you, this is something that will affect you your entire life. And of course, to some extent, there are things that we can control about how people react to us. We can control our behavior. We can take care of our bodies or not take care of our bodies. We can change our appearance or not. So there are things that we can control. But this Maya thing, this Arudha Lagna, has to do more with energy. It has to do with the energy, literally like the way that the energy vibrates in the ether around you, and how people perceive you based on this first impression that they have of you, of your energy. Sometimes, of course, it could be also strictly connected to your physical appearance, but in my experience, not really. So it's not entirely based on physical appearance. There's also something undefined about it. There's something, that people just pick up on based on this Arudha Lagna. And it's not just that, but you can see so many things from the Arudha Lagna. You can see whether a person is likely to become famous, for instance, or to get any kind of recognition in this life. You can see if a person is perceived as threatening or not. Are they perceived as kind or not? Are they, what kind of people will support you in this life? What people will support others, based on the Arudha Lagna? What your secret enemies are likely to be? What class of people is going to support you and what class of people is going to be against you? All kinds of things. You can see countless things. I will get into more details in future videos, perhaps. But most importantly, what you need to remember is that the Arudha Lagna rules the way that others respond to you. And this is so important because let me put it like this. Let's say you take somebody who looks like the Mountain in Game of Thrones, and somebody like that would want to be a nurse or wants to be in geriatric care, or, I don't know, he wants to be a pet shop owner. Most people would frown upon him doing that, looking the way he looked in the Game of Thrones series. Because there is a certain perception that most people will have of somebody who looks like that. Of course, also the way that he behaves, not just what he looks like. And this is kind of what the Arudha Lagna shows. So, most likely you will gain the most success in life if you act or if you choose professions that go hand in hand with your Arudha Lagna. So, if you work with the way that others perceive you and not against that. And again, you will understand it better when I get into examples and maybe future videos as well. So this is the Arudha Lagna. Another way that I can think of it, which I think is maybe more visual, if you've seen The Matrix, and I'm pretty sure most of you have, the original Matrix made in 1999, you probably remember that scene where I think it was the first time where Neo was being trained by Morpheus and he was well, not, I don't know if it was the first time, but it was that big challenge that he had to get logged into the Matrix, and he had to try to leap from one building to another. There were these really tall buildings, like probably around 100 stories high, and it was all about to test Neo's mind, because his mind couldn't perceive the fact that he could make that jump. And of course, the first time he tries it, he falls in the simulation. And even though it is a simulation and he gets brought back from the Matrix, he has blood around his mouth, and he looks at Morpheus and asks, okay, what is this? I thought it was not supposed to be real. And Morpheus said something along the lines of, well, the body cannot live without the mind, so if you die in the Matrix, you die here. Something like that, end quote. And that's pretty much how I see the Arudha Lagna, except it's more like the other way around. The Arudha Lagna is more like the body, so the mind cannot live without the body in this case. Meaning, like, if it doesn't matter what your soul is, like, on the inside, but if the way that the world perceives you puts you at odds with what you really want to achieve in this world, you will never have the opportunity to materialize it. And that's how I think about it. Okay, I digress. So this is the Arudha Lagna. So how do you calculate it? It's really simple. There's a lot of theories online, but the way that I calculate it is very simple. So the rule of thumb is you look at the ascendant sign, and what the ruler of the ascendant is and which house it is sitting in. So for instance, if your ascendant is Aries and Mars is sitting in the 3rd house, so your Mars is sitting in Gemini, okay? So the distance from the ascendant to the ascendant ruler is exactly 3 houses long. So you calculate from where the ascendant ruler is, in this case Mars, you calculate 3 more placements, and that is the Arudha Lagna. So in this case you have like 3rd house, 4th house, 5th house. So the 5th house will become your Arudha Lagna, which is Leo. The exception to the rule is if your ascendant ruler falls into the 1st or the 7th houses, then you detract 4 houses, because the rule is that the Arudha Lagna cannot be the ascendant or the descendant, so the ascendant or the sign opposite it. For example, so let's say your ascendant is, I don't know, let me think. Let's say your ascendant is Leo, right? And your sun sits in the 1st house, so it's in the ascendant. You detract 4 placements from that, and that will become your Arudha Lagna. In other words, your 10th house will become your Arudha Lagna. So your Arudha Lagna will be Taurus. If the ruler, let's say if your ascendant is a Leo and the ruler of Leo, which is Sun, is in the 7th house, then you detract 4 placements from the 7th house, and you get to the 4th house, which is Scorpio. And now Scorpio is your Arudha Lagna. And those are the 2 exceptions. In all other cases, you just use the base rule. And you're going to maybe, if you're having trouble understanding this, you're going to understand better when I use examples at the end of the video. And this was the calculation. So now this is the Maya. Another thing that I want to point out in this particular video, and I might expand it in other videos, is I am going to look at 2 main things with regards to Arudha Lagna when it comes to seeing how a person will be perceived. Well, 2 main things, but it's actually 4 main things, okay? First of all, you have to look at the Arudha Lagna in itself, the sign. Any planets that are sitting in the Arudha Lagna will greatly influence the way that people perceive you. I won't get into the description. I might make a separate video for, I don't know. Please comment in the comment section if you want to hear more detailed stuff about Arudha Lagna and houses and placements and all this stuff. But for now, what I'm going to say is, for instance, like if you have a threatening planet, quote unquote, a malefic planet, aspecting your ascendant, especially sitting in the ascendant or sitting opposite the ascendant in the 7th house, you will be perceived to be a rather threatening individual. Same thing, and equally important, if there are any malefics in the third house from the Arudha Lagna. Why the third house? I am not 100% sure, but the third house is the house of your will, of your willpower, of where you channel your energy. And I actually noticed this so many times. People who have malefics in the third house from the Arudha Lagna, they come across as threatening. And the most malefics of the malefics are Saturn and Mars. If you have both Saturn and Mars in the third house from the Arudha and you don't have any other benefic planets there, you are very likely to be seen as a very threatening individual. And this is actually positive for people like who want to work, for instance, in defense forces, and equally valid for people who want to work in any criminal organizations, because these are, places where it is good to be threatening. Unfortunately, what it often means is that if you have malefics in these visible parts, because these are the most visible energies of the Arudha. So the first, the seventh house, to a little bit lesser extent, also the 10th house from the Arudha, but especially the first, seventh, and the third house from the Arudha, this is gonna give off your main energy to the world. And if you have malefics here, people will see you as a pretty tough person, depending on what other aspects are going on. If there are mostly benefics here, you will be perceived as a good person, as a genuine, kind person, depending on what planets are there as well. And this can have a multitude, of course, of ramifications. And you will especially see this when you look at charts of politicians, for instance, because some of them are negatively perceived from the get-go, and others get away with a lot of, I'm sorry to say, crap for years before anybody notices that anything is going on. And this is because the ones that have the ones that get away with a lot of things are people who have benefics mostly in the first, third, and seventh from the Arudha Lagna, and people can't really don't really suspect them of doing horrible things if you have, mostly benefics. Or if you have, of course, to a lesser extent, you also want to look at what sign is placed in the first, the third, especially the first and the third houses from the Arudha Lagna. This is important, but to a lesser extent. So if you have like a malefic sign in the third from the Arudha Lagna, this also shows that you can be perceived as relatively threatening, but not if it's further reinforced by other aspects. Another thing that you look at is just aspects in general. So maybe you don't have malefics in the third house, but you have like Mars in the 9th house, which means Mars is casting its 7th aspect on the 3rd house. It's still kind of valid, but to a lesser extent than, if you actually had Mars and Saturn there. Mars and or Saturn there. And more specifically, if you see people with Saturn or in the 3rd house from the Arudha Lagna, or Capricorn, Aquarius on the 3rd house from the Arudha Lagna, these are people who are perceived as calculating and planning, and oftentimes they do turn out to be calculating and planning, because it kind of goes back to the idea that I mentioned before of the mind and the body. So here's the thing, Arudha Lagna, shows the way that people respond to you. So from the time that you are very young, the way that people respond to you is actually going to condition the way that you behave later on in life. So let's say if you're somebody who, and I've seen this, for instance, people who have Scorpio Ascendant oftentimes get scapegoated because people perceive them as somebody who has like some kind of a dark secret looping over them. And they're, especially women with Scorpio Arudha Lagna, they're often perceived as being manipulative and using their sexuality in some kind of dark way. Angelina Jolie has this placement, for instance, and I've often seen that they're scapegoated. Like, this is just a parenthesis. I might make videos later on for each of the Arudha Lagna Ascendant with examples as well. So I've seen this. So, like, for instance, if you have a Scorpio Ascendant, people probably from the time you were very young have responded to you like you're this really dark, brooding, possibly manipulative person, like there's something wrong with you, like you look like you're hiding something. And because people are treating you in this way, you will respond accordingly. Most likely you're going to become increasingly more introverted, and you're going to try to hide from people. You're going to think like, okay, I can't be myself around people because, anything I say can be used against me, that kind of thing. So it goes hand in hand, So, and this is funny. This is interesting to see the difference between the Arudha and the Karakamsha, which I'm going to get into in a short while. Because the Arudha actually oftentimes goes hand in hand with life experience. Like, for instance, I knew a few people who they had Saturn or Mars in the 3rd house from the Arudha, and they were severely bullied when they were kids. Like, they went through being downright, beaten up, and then they go through this transformation later on in life where they become bullies. They go through, they take on karate and they take on kickboxing or wherever, and they start to become these really threatening individuals because people have tried to overpower them at some point. This is why the Arudha Lagna, but the Arudha Lagna still is about the material world. It's still kind of the illusion, because it doesn't show what you really are like on the inside. And it sometimes causes painful situations, obviously, you could be like this really the most adorable, innocent person who is always thinking about the goodness of mankind, and you're like giving money to charity, but people treat you like you're some kind of a, the usual suspect, you're always finding yourself being scapegoated, or people think there's something dubious and sinister about you without you even doing anything. And on the other way around, if your Karakamsha shows that you're an inherently tough individual, but your Arudha Lagna shows that you're this cute little bunny that everybody's like, aww, when they see you, it will be extremely frustrating because you feel like you're not being taken seriously enough, or like people inside, you could be a person who's capable of horrible things if you're being threatened, but on the outside, people will be like, oh, this person would not hurt a fly. I mean, they're so nice, And this is really, really fascinating to watch in cases of, again, like I said, mostly politicians, but any kind of public person. Because if you look at their Arudha Lagna and you look at their Karakamsha, sometimes you see totally different stories. Pretty fascinating and pretty horrifying at the same time. And I'm going to talk about the examples I chose at the end are serial killers. Because it's not like I'm obsessed with serial killers, but I think serial killers are a good example of how appearances can be deceptive. And, to horrible consequences. But I digress. So where was I? Right. So I did explain how the Arudha Lagna is calculated, and now let me get into the other side, the Karakamsha, and I'm going to start with the beginning. The Karakamsha is actually calculated on the Atmakaraka. And what is the Atmakaraka? You probably have heard this term before. I have mentioned it a few times in previous videos. It is the planet with the highest degree in your chart. And this is without looking at the actual sign, you just look at the degree. So I think the highest degree is 29 degrees, 59 minutes, pretty much. Pretty much, I think. So if you look at the degrees, and you only look at the planets from Sun to Saturn, because this is Vedic Astrology, so, and sidereal zodiac, that's what I use. You can use tropical zodiac if you want, but in my humble opinion, it is not as accurate. So you look at the planets from Sun to Saturn, and only one of these can be your Atmakaraka. So the Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, or Saturn can be Atmakaraka. And this planet, the Atmakaraka, the planet with the highest degree, is kind of like your North Star. It is what your soul has come to experience in this lifetime. And there are several significators to describe the soul's path and the soul stage of evolution. There are entire charts in Vedic astrology, like I think the D60 chart that shows like your karma, or the D30 that shows your misfortunes, and there are all these theories in, there's even a chart that shows how you died in a past life and what you did in a past life, but I won't get into this. But basically, this is a very simplified and pretty accurate way to see where a person is heading in their life. What do they see as the most important thing that they want to achieve in this life? And that is shown by the Atmakaraka. Atmakaraka by sign, by placement in the nakshatra, by any aspects that it is receiving, house placement, of course. So you look at the whole thing. And this Atmakaraka, like for instance, the Atmakaraka is something that your soul wants to experience in this lifetime. Like for instance, the North Node is also something that you are meant to experience, but the North Node is something else. Like the North Node is showing an area that you haven't experienced in previous reincarnations, and you need to experience them in this lifetime in order to grow. But they are not what your soul is yearning for. And there's another thing like called, I think, the destiny point, that is like the midpoint between the North Node and the Moon, but I won't get into that. But just looking at the Atmakaraka, you will get very valuable insights. Remember, going back to the legend of Daedalus and Icarus, so this, character who creates a fake flying machine, actually creates a flying machine, tying feathers with wax, and he tries to fly into the sun, and the closer he gets to the sun, the more the sun will melt away the wax, and eventually he dies because, the sun has melted away his flying machine. And that is literally the Atmakaraka. So it's that thing that you are constantly wanting to achieve. It is like, somewhere at the back of your mind. It's the things you're constantly thinking about. And this Atmakaraka is, I'm not going to get into the description for each planet. And again, there is material online that you can find, like what it means when you have each planet as an Atmakaraka. They're pretty simple to explain. Like for instance, if you have Sun as the Atmakaraka, somehow your path in this life is connected to leadership, or like achieving fame, being at the center stage, to some extent being a protective figure, a father figure, etc. All this stuff. Maybe also being involved with politics to some extent. But this is it in a nutshell. This is the Atmakaraka. And the Amatyakaraka is the planet with the second highest degree, which I think is equally important. And this Amatyakaraka is the planet that shows the vehicle or the vehicles that you are going to use in order to achieve your Atmakaraka's goal. So for instance, let's say you have Sun as Atmakaraka, and your goal in life is to achieve fame somehow. Like, of course, this is all going to vary based on where the sun is placed, what house, what nakshatra, etc. But let's say overall you want to achieve fame in this life, and your Amatyakaraka is Mars. Then most likely you will use Martian traits in your Mars situation, everything the Mars has to offer in your chart, any aspects it gets from other planets. Again, house placement, nakshatra placement, sign placement, all that stuff. You're going to be using that Mars energy to achieve the sun's goal. So, like, one simple example could be, let's say you want to become a political leader, and you start out by joining the defense forces, the military, the aviation, whatever it is. Anything to do with the Mars, right? Or let's say you want to be a lead surgeon, depending on other aspects that the Mars might be receiving. Something, because Mars is to do with, fighting spirit, warriorship, weapons, but it's also leadership. It's also things to do that, anything to do with cutting something is connected by Mars, just to give you an example, right? And why am I focusing on these things. These things are very important, and they're a very simple way to see where a person's heart lies. Of course, together with other planets in the D1 and in the D9 chart, and in the Karakamsha, which I will be talking about a little in a bit. You need to look at these things to see where a person's heart lies. And it's very important when you look at politicians. Again, I have something about politicians. I might be doing, like I did mention, I wanted to do a chart comparison between Trump and Biden. Like, maybe I will do that, but I don't know. Or like separately different. By the way, comment in the comment section if you would like to see like celebrity astro analysis, you know, for whatever, any kind of celebrities, like, or any public figures that you might be interested in. But yeah, it's important to see this, because if you look at if you just look at the person from the surface, you see the Arudha Lagna, because that's what the most visible part of a person is. But you don't see the Atmakaraka, the Amatyakaraka, you don't see the moon placement. Like, these are very important things to check, but I won't get into them. But the Atmakaraka and the Amatyakaraka, and other things like that, like the destiny point, like the North Node, to a lesser extent. Mostly the Atmakaraka and the Amatyakaraka, they show your soul, like the sum of all the previous things that you have gone through in previous lives. Ketu, to some extent, also shows things that you have experienced in previous reincarnations, and it shows where you are most comfortable doing what you're focusing on. But the Atmakaraka is your true north. So like that's where your heart lies. And from the Atmakaraka, you calculate the Karakamsha, which is very simple. The Karakamsha is the sign that the Atmakaraka planet sits in the D9 chart, or the Navamsha chart. So for instance, let's say you have Sun in, doesn't matter, like any sign. Let's say you have Sun as the Atmakaraka, like Sun in Aries in the D1 chart, and that Sun is in Scorpio in the D9 chart. Scorpio now becomes your Karakamsha. And you now can use Scorpio as an ascendant to look at the rest of your chart. And that is how you see a person's inner soul, like what their nature is. Are they a good person? Are they a bad person? What they really care about? Where their destiny is heading? Like, what is going to be the fulfilling path for them spiritually? And again, most important things that I look at is the first and the third house from the Karakamsha, especially the third house from the Karakamsha. The third house from the Karakamsha is not going to be visible, unlike the third from the Arudha. But if you see malefics in the third from the Karakamsha, this person is somebody you need to watch out for. Because you're going to understand, again, when I get into the examples at the end. Again, especially if you see the most malefics of the malefic are Mars and Saturn. So if you see Mars or Saturn in the third from the Karakamsha, dear God. I mean, and there are not other benefics there, because you might have like Saturn and Moon, let's say. That's not going to be so bad. It depends on other aspects. But if you just have a malefic, or if you just have malefics aspecting the third from the Karakamsha, this is most likely not going to be a nice person. And it's not to say that anybody who has malefics there is going to be evil to the bone, but literally what it means, according to the sages, is that this person is harsh at their core, at the core of their being. This is a harsh person. Like, if you see Mars in the third from the Karakamsha, let's say this is somebody who maybe has gone through warfare in previous reincarnations, and there's somebody who has had to fight for their survival maybe, or they've had to go through a lot of hardships in previous lives, and now they are really tough, like they are capable of violence. Somebody, especially when you see Mars either sitting in, so either you have third house from the Karakamsha sitting in Scorpio or Aries, to a lesser extent, that can also show a possibility that a person can be violent. But you also want to look at the ruler of the third house. Where is Mars? What is Mars doing? How is it aspected? Is it aspected by any benefics? Then maybe a lot of this will be cancelled out. But if it is further damaged by other malefics, then you can most likely think this person is not well-intentioned. And other malefics, so the main two malefics are Saturn and Mars, but to a lesser extent, Rahu, Ketu, these are also very malefic, and each of these planets means a different thing. So Saturn in the third from the Karakamsha, or Saturn sitting as the ruler of the third house from the Karakamsha, tends to show a person who is plotting schemes. This is somebody who's capable of masterminding dark plans. Literally. I mean, it may sound really horrible. I actually had to deal with a guy that I am to this day sure, almost 100% sure, that he was a psychopath. I'm somebody who likes to read psychology, and trust me, he had all of the trademarks of psychopathy. And when I did his chart, because before we had a fallout, he gave me his birth time. And I looked at his Arudha and his Karakamsha, and he had Saturn in the third from the Karakamsha and from the Arudha, which makes sense. And remember this, when you see Saturn in some way aspecting or influencing the third from the Karakamsha, and to a lesser extent from the Arudha, these are people who can plot a lot of schemes, and these are people who can lie a lot. So Saturn is not likely to be malefic in the sense that they will be directly aggressive or violent, but they can actually determine others to be aggressive. For instance, they will pay money to people who do damaging things. One example, if you see Mars in the third from the Karakamsha, this is somebody who's likely to be violent. This is someone who, down to their bone, are capable of horrible things. It doesn't mean, of course, that if you see this, it's 100% that this person is going to kill someone. Of course not. You have to look at other things. You have to look also at the Atmakaraka and the Amatyakaraka, because if the Atmakaraka and the Amatyakaraka, they're in a healthy place, like let's say the Atmakaraka is the moon and it's exalted in Taurus, and the Amatyakaraka is Venus. These are benefic planets, most likely, and you see a lot of placements, that don't show violence in the natal chart. Then this could be somebody who maybe has had a lot of harshness, and maybe they really have an inner harshness, and they have that, and they are capable of using it. But unless there's some kind of a trigger, or like there's something going on otherwhere in the chart, somewhere else in the chart, it's not going to happen. So they're not going to have an outburst. But why is it even useful to look at these things? Because it settles a lot of doubts. Like I've mentioned with public figures, you can look at the Arudha Lagna, for instance, just a parenthesis, not about the Karakamsha, but about the Arudha Lagna. You can look at the Arudha Lagna to see circumstances of death. I don't know if I mentioned this. Did I mention this before? I may have mentioned it. If you want to see videos about circumstances of death, although I did think it was kind of a morbid subject, please leave comments below. So you can see circumstances of death. Like you can see if somebody has had a wrongful death or a violent death, or if they were truly killed by accident. For instance, hint, Marilyn Monroe's case. You can see that in her case there was some violence involved with her death. I won't get into that. Again, if you want to hear more about this subject, please comment in the comment sections, because it's a lengthy thing to debate. But back to the Karakamsha, right? So if you see Mars in the Karakamsha, or Mars aspecting the third house from the Karakamsha, again, also malefic sitting in the Karakamsha, but especially when malefics are either sitting in, or they are ruling, or they are aspecting the third house from the Karakamsha, then a person is capable of horrible things. Capable. It's not sure that they will do it. You have to look at other things. And the other malefics that I was going to talk about, so if you see Rahu, let's say, in the third from the Karakamsha, this is somebody who can use a lot of narcissistic tactics. Like, people who manipulate the media, people who tell lies, people who try to who create smoke and mirrors illusions, to bamboozle the enemies. These are people who have Rahu in the third from the Karakamsha. If you have Ketu in the third from the Karakamsha, very, very strange people have Ketu in the third from the Karakamsha. This is somebody that will literally use black magic against their enemies. And again, this may sound incredibly weird to some people, but this has been my experience. So people who have Ketu in general, like people who are very Ketu dominant, I would not be surprised if these people were to use voodoo or conjure things, or, because Ketu is the spiritual world. A person who has Ketu in the third, they won't be stupid enough to use violence, because they have access to other things, like conjuring stuff. And again, these are things that you won't see from any other things unless you look at the third from the Karakamsha. If a person has Cancer Arudha Lagna, and let's say, what is it, the third from the Cancer? So it's like Cancer, Leo, Virgo, right? So Cancer Arudha Lagna puts Virgo on the third from the Arudha Lagna. Mercury is not exactly a benefic, but it's definitely not a malefic. And unless there are malefics aspecting this person's chart, they're gonna come off as an adorable little bunny rabbit. Your people are gonna look at this person and they're like, oh, they wouldn't hurt a fly. And then you look at their Karakamsha and you see Mars and Ketu in the third house. You know that you need to keep an eye out for this person, and let's just say maybe try not to cross them. Again, if there are benefics together with malefics, it could go either way. It could show a person who, like, if you have, let's say, Mars and Moon in the third from the Karakamsha, maybe this person is normally a very gentle person. I mean, Moon there definitely shows that they're also very empathetic and very sensitive. But then if you threaten the people that they care about, they will come after you and hunt you down and kill you. Like, kind of like Liam Neeson in that movie. I will find you and I will kill you, and I forgot what the whole line is, but I'm pretty sure you know. I think it was called Taken? Maybe I'm wrong. Anyway. Right, so the Karakamsha, this is the Karakamsha. And also, another thing that I should mention very importantly is that when you're looking at the Karakamsha, you need to look at it from both the D9 and the D1 chart. So Karakamsha is, in the D9, and so, like I mentioned, so you have to use the Karakamsha as the ascendant. So for instance, let's say your D9 chart ascendant is Scorpio, but your Karakamsha is Gemini. You don't change anything else about the D9. You simply look at the chart as if Gemini were your ascendant. And then you look at where all the other planets are placed, and that's how you analyze the houses with respect to the Karakamsha. And you do the same thing in the D1. Because either way, the third from the Karakamsha, either in the D1 or in the D9, will show your inner self, your inner being, so to speak. And another thing that I should mention about the Arudha Lagna is that you have two cases where the ascendant has two rulers. If you have Scorpio ascendant in the D1 chart, Scorpio is ruled by Mars and Ketu. So in order to calculate your Arudha Lagna, you're going to have two Arudha Lagnas. It's going to get complicated. So you're going to have to look at both Ketu and Mars and where they're sitting and do the whole Arudha Lagna thing, calculation, and you will have two Arudha Lagnas. And you need to look at them both equally and see which one of them has the more powerful placement. So, like, I don't know, with you have two Arudha Lagnas, let's say in one of them you don't have any malefics in the third, but then in the other one you have Mars in the third, then it will still very likely be that you are seen as a threatening person, because they are equally important. Same thing if your ascendant in the D1 is Aquarius. Aquarius is ruled by Saturn and Rahu. And you need to do the whole Arudha Lagna calculation, and you will have two Arudha Lagnas. This is just a parenthesis, but it's pretty important. So now, finally, to get into the examples. So the examples that I have found. Charles Manson. So, short introduction of Charles Manson. He was a complete psychopath. You probably have heard of him. He started a cult called the Manson family. And he was responsible for the murder of Roman Polanski's wife, Sharon Tate, I think in 1969. Yeah, 1969. And he was basically, even though he actually did not physically kill her, not just Sharon Tate, actually, I think there were like Sharon Tate and like 3 or 4 of her guests were killed by a group of Manson's followers, cult followers, which were 3 women and 1 man. And so what did I look at with Charles? What did I look at in Charles Manson's case? First of all, I looked at the Arudha Lagna. So his ascendant, and I will be posting the chart on the screen. So his ascendant is in Aries. Wait, before I get into it, about the charts on the screen, I have used, as you can see there, sidereal and whole sign house system, but because this was calculated with astro.com, they left the tropical planets there, so Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, but I will not be using those, so just ignore them. And yeah, everything else I guess stands. I also will not be using the MC and the IC, which is the medium coeli and imum coeli. I think they're shown on the chart. Yeah, just ignore those anyway. So just look at the things that I will be describing. Ascendant in Aries, his ruler, Mars, his ascendant ruler, is in Leo. And if you get, so you count 5 placements from Leo, right? Because, so you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the distance between the ascendant and the ascendant ruler, Mars, is 5 placements. And now you count 5 placements from Mars, and you get to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Sagittarius. Sagittarius becomes the Arudha Lagna. And now you take this Sagittarius 9th house as the ascendant. So it no longer is the 9th house. If you cast the Arudha Lagna chart, it becomes the 1st house. And where you see the Moon and Saturn and Rahu there in Capricorn, that will be the 2nd house from the Arudha Lagna. And so in his case, the 3rd house falls in Aquarius. As you can see, the 3rd house doesn't have any planets, but first of all, it is ruled by Saturn, which is already a malefic, and co-ruled by Rahu, which is a lesser malefic. The 3rd house is aspected by Mars, as you can see there, because opposite the Aquarius is Leo. So his Mars is in Leo, and it's aspecting the 3rd house. But so from this you can see he was kind of an aggressive figure, but not an overly malefic person. Didn't come across as big enough of a threat. Didn't show that he was capable of what he was ultimately capable of. Because his ascendant, his Arudha Lagna, is in Sagittarius. And by the way, Sagittarius is the sign of religion, of beliefs. And he was a cult leader. I wonder why. And yeah, so again, this goes hand in hand to what I said about people are easily able to slip into the shoes of the Arudha Lagna because people will see them as the Arudha Lagna. So in this case, people saw him as a religious leader. He was a psychopath, but nevertheless a religious leader. And also, if you look at his chart, the ruler of the Arudha Lagna, Jupiter, is basically in conjunction to Sun, Venus, and Mercury. So conjunct the Sun shows that he was seen as somebody who has leadership ability, and worshipped. So he would easily fall into this place of being worshipped, especially by lots of young women. I mean, look at Venus being conjunct Jupiter there, his Arudha Lagna ruler. And let me think. Right, so this is the way that he came across, right, the Arudha Lagna. So he probably did come across as somebody with a strong will, Another thing is the 6th house from the Arudha Lagna, and I probably should have mentioned this, shows how people see you when it comes to your enemies. So the 6th house is the house of enemies. The 12th house is the house of hidden enemies. But the 6th house shows how people think that you will retaliate. So if you have benefics in the 6th from the Arudha Lagna, people will not see you as somebody capable of violence or evil retaliation, which was a bad judgment when it came to Manson, because it turns out that what he did was absolutely an act of vengeance. But I will expand in a short while. And, right, so his Arudha Lagna, I made some notes here, I gotta check. Ruler of the 3rd house, right, Saturn, as you can see, falls into the 2nd house, and it's conjunct the moon and the north node. Now, the moon is a benefic. So people kind of muffles the evilness of Saturn. So again, people probably didn't perceive him as evil enough, even though there was Mars aspecting the 3rd from his Arudha. The moon also being there, and his Arudha Lagna being in Sagittarius, he probably came across as somebody who was strong-willed, but not exactly prone to violence. Let's see. And wait. 7th house, 7, 8. Right, and also look at the 9th house, right? The 7th house from his Arudha Lagna is Gemini. The 9th house falls in Aries. And, yeah, falls in Aries. The 9th house is going to show your support group. So the people that are going to support you. He got support from angry young people. His followers, especially young men. Aries shows things like warriors, engineers, but generally young men in general. That's what Aries shows, and Mars. But I digress there. So just about his Arudha Lagna. So I mentioned this. Mars makes a full aspect on the 3rd house from the Arudha Lagna. In the natal chart, though, with regards to his Atmakaraka and Karakamsha, his Atmakaraka, so he has, let me see. Yeah, his Atmakaraka, so if you look there, the planet with the highest degree is Saturn in 28 degrees Capricorn. The planet with the 2nd highest degree is the Sun with 26 degrees Libra. So his Atmakaraka is Saturn and his Amatyakaraka is the Sun. And if you look into it even more in depth, Saturn is conjunct Moon, conjunct Rahu in Capricorn, and Sun is conjunct Venus in Chitra, Nakshatra. And so Saturn is in Uttarashadha. I wrote these down because Saturn in Uttarashadha Uttarashadha Nakshatra is ruled by the Sun. It is also called the latter victorious Nakshatra. So it's connected to the desire to reach high status in society, especially since it's also in Capricorn. But it's ruled by the Sun, which creates an enemy relationship between the Atmakaraka and the Nakshatra that it sits in, which means that this Atmakaraka is a little bit frustrated here because it's falling into the den of its arch enemy, the Sun. And Saturn is conjunct Venus. No, sorry. It's conjunct Moon and conjunct Rahu. I also talked about this in the video I made about serial killers, because I think I also mentioned Manson in that video as well. It's that if you see Moon heavily afflicted, it shows a very unstable mind. And I'm sorry, if you have heard Manson talking, he was insane. And based on reports, his followers were pretty much insane. And I don't think you need to see reports, actually, just hearing about what they did, the murders and everything. They were clearly mentally imbalanced. Now, again, I'm not trying to say that any person who has Saturn conjunct Moon is going to be insane or something. But in his case, Saturn conjunct Moon in Capricorn and conjunct Rahu. Rahu is a planet that shows ups and downs and shows a lot of turbulence and electricity. So it can show a person who can be easily troubled. I didn't look at the full range of aspects, but I'm pretty sure these are the only aspects that his moon makes. And also the moon in Capricorn is not in a great place. Saturn is really overpowering the empathy and the emotions that moon would normally show. But this is just something that I wrote in terms of other red flags that support his actions in the natal chart. And Sun conjunct Venus, so Sun is his Amatyakaraka. He used his leadership skills to achieve his Atmakaraka's desire. And not only that, but Sun conjunct Venus in Chitra, Chitra Nakshatra is ruled by Mars. And both of these nakshatra, actually, no, not both of them, but this nakshatra, Chitra, is a Rakshasa nakshatra, so it's governed by desire, and it's a so-called demon nakshatra, which is governed by selfish desire and ambition. And Chitra is also connected to a fascination with beauty and the world of glamour. This is really important because according to, I actually looked for articles about the murders, and the reason why he set his followers to kill everybody in that house was because the man who had previously lived in that house in Sharon Tate's mansion was some kind of I think he was somebody in the music business, and Manson really wanted to have a musical career, and this guy, I think, denied him a contract or something. So in revenge, Manson made his followers go to that place and kill everybody. And this is a literal quote. So let me think. Manson allegedly instructed Tex Watson to take Susan Atkins, Linda Kasabian, and Patricia Krenwinkel to that house where Melcher used to live, and to totally destroy everyone in it as gruesome as you can, in quotation marks, according to Helter Skelter, the true story of the Manson murder. This was a quote from an online article. So he literally wanted revenge against the people that he saw as the glamour world of Hollywood. And it really plays out in his chart, because this is where he was going for, and somehow he didn't manage to achieve what he wanted, and he became frustrated. And this is what you see in his seventh, in his natal chart, sorry, not his seventh. And now, more interestingly, to look to his Karakamsha in the D9 chart. So, in the D9 chart, which I will be showing on the screen, the Navamsha, his Atmakaraka, which is Saturn, falls in Virgo. Let me see. I know this chart is a little bit upside down, but this is the way Astro.com does it, so apologies. But you just have to visualize it. It doesn't matter what the chart is arranged as. You just look at the sign placements and calculate from that sign placement counterclockwise. So the Saturn is in Virgo, Atmakaraka is in Virgo, so Virgo becomes the Karakamsha. The third house from the Karakamsha is in Scorpio. Now, there are no planets in the third from the Karakamsha, but let me see. Opposite. Let me see. But Scorpio in itself, right, is a pretty bad sign. And Mars is conjunct Rahu in Libra. Mars in Libra, first of all, is not healthy because it is in the enemy sign, and it's conjunct a malefic, furthermore making it malefic. Rahu simply amplifies anything that it touches. So in this case, much as you would interpret it in the D1 chart, When you see Rahu conjunct a malefic planet, it will just boost the energy of the malefic planet. Unless there are other benefics there to counterbalance the Rahu, which I don't see, it's going to stay just even more malefic. So the third from the Karakamsha is malefic. And not only that, but let me see. Saturn actually aspects the third from the Karakamsha, because Saturn aspects the third house from itself. So Saturn will aspect the Scorpio sign. So you already have 3 malefics influencing the third house from the Karakamsha. You have Mars, Rahu, and Saturn. And especially Mars and Saturn. Even though there are no planets actually sitting there, this is bad enough, because the ruler of the third house is further emphasized, and there are no benefics really. I mean, you have Venus here, which is aspecting the third house as well, but you still have an overwhelming energy of malefics on the third from the Karakamsha. And not all, wait. Yeah, pretty much. Oh, sorry, did I say Rahu? I made a mistake. I meant Ketu. Yeah, Rahu is the other one. It's upside down, so it's Ketu. And, yeah, so it's Ketu. But you have malefics. Ooh, Ketu is actually making even more sense, because he's somebody who's was religiously inclined, because he started a cult. So that would make sense. In any case, so, okay, because it's Ketu, you can't say that it's boosting Mars energy, but it is, let's say, deepening Mars energy, because both Mars and Ketu are ruling Scorpio anyway. So in any case, it still stands. So you have 3 malefics influencing the third house from the Karakamsha. I really need to shorten these videos, because I'm losing my voice. And also you have Venus aspecting the third from the Karakamsha, but Venus is weakened by comparison to all this malefic energy. And let me see what else. Yeah, in the D1, there are no planets from the Karakamsha, in the third house from the Karakamsha. But what is happening in the D1, in the D9 in his case, is bad enough with regards to seeing his inner nature. It is clear that at his core, he was a really savage person. You know, there's very little to offset all of that negative savagery shown by Mars and Ketu and Saturn. Okay, so the next example and final, Ted Bundy, another nice one. I also mentioned his chart in the video that I made on serial killers. So Ted Bundy, again, another killer. This one was a serial killer, quite literally. He murdered countless women, and by all accounts seemed to be a true-blooded psychopath. And it's so interesting to look at his chart. His Arudha Lagna, first of all, how people saw him. Seed him? I really need to shorten these videos. So, how people saw him. So, his Arudha Lagna, his Ascendant, as you can see, I will post the chart. Again, Ascendant in Aries. Yeah, well, again, in both of these guys' charts, like I mentioned in the general descriptions, you see a lot of aspects. So it's not just the Karakamsha, so it's not just, or the Arudha. That's definitely not the Arudha, because people didn't see them as the serious threats that they were. But it's not just the fact that they had malefics in the Karakamsha, they also had themes in the D1 chart that showed tendency towards violence and a lot of troubled things, troubled childhood, troubled mind, etc. So yeah, I digress. So his Ascendant, Ted Bundy's Ascendant, was in Aries, and the Mars, the ruler of the Ascendant, Mars, is sitting in Capricorn, 10th house. And now you calculate 10 placements from Mars. No, wait, I made a mistake. Damn. Yeah, I made a mistake. Scratch that. So, I was looking at the Navamsha chart. Damn it. Right. So, his ascendant was not Aries. It was in Leo. And you can see the chart on the screen. You can probably see the chart. So, ascendant in Leo, Sun is in the 4th house, as you can see. Calculate 4 placements from the 4th house, and you will get to the, let me see, and you get to the 7th house. Now, his ascendant, the Arudha Lagna ascendant, is Aquarius. And as you can see on the chart, there are no planets in Aquarius. And the 3rd house from Aquarius is Aries. And even though it is Aries, which is kind of a violent sign, having no planets in either the 1st or the 3rd house from the Arudha Lagna, either the 7th from the Arudha Lagna, as you can see, Leo has no planets there either. This does not come across as a particularly threatening individual. Furthermore, as you can see, the ruler of the 3rd house from the Arudha Lagna, which is Mars, is conjunct the moon and the sun and Mercury. Now, the sun is kind of a half malefic. I should have mentioned this probably in the general description. The sun is not really a malefic, but when you see it in the 3rd from the Arudha or the 3rd from the Karakamsha, this is somebody who's very good at holding their ground. They are not malefic in the sense that they would kill someone or do something shady, but if you threaten them, they are capable of becoming dangerous. But they are not inherently evil individuals. So basically what I'm getting at here is that there is no real malefic influence on his Arudha Lagna ascendant or the 3rd house. So mostly it's harmless. So probably people, especially the women that, fell prey to his charms, were completely unsuspecting victims. They had no idea what monster he really was, because on the surface he came across as probably this really friendly, harmless guy. I mean, Aquarius as your Arudha Lagna shows a person that, looks like a humanitarian. They look like they're friendly with everybody, they're open to everybody. They come across as, the people's friend, that kind of thing. Somebody who's, all-inclusive and respectful of other people's individuality, etc. And the ruler of the 3rd house conjunct moon probably made him seem like somebody who is empathetic, understanding, and yet firm and just, because there's a sun there and Mercury. So, overall, there's no real malefic influence. Now, if you look at his overall chart, the Arudha Lagna, no, not the Arudha Lagna. The red flags that I saw in his chart. So, first of all, his Atmakaraka, similarly, there's an influence of Chitra Nakshatra. So his Atmakaraka is Venus. If you look at his natal chart, planet with the highest degree is Venus. 27 degrees Libra, and it's sitting in Chitra Nakshatra, and it's conjunct Jupiter, which is also in Chitra Nakshatra. And Chitra Nakshatra, like I mentioned in the other example, has to do with the love of glamour. So being attracted to the world of glamour, and in this particular case, it also signifies women and pleasure. And, being conjunct Jupiter, all of these things are expanded. So this clearly shows somebody whose main goal in life was somehow connected to, this may sound really creepy, but women and all things feminine and pleasure. And what he did was basically for sexual gratification based on, based on the documentaries that I've seen about him anyway. And actually, with his own words, he said that he developed some kind of weird porn addiction that made him, very aggressive. And of course, this was just a way that a psychopath was justifying his actions, because, plenty of people probably watch pornography, but they do not become psychopaths or murderers. There was something seriously wrong with Bundy. But you can see what his inner motivation was. So his inner motivation, Venus, is about pleasure. It's about women. It's about, fun and games, sugar, spice, everything nice. And and more darkly in his chart, conjunct Jupiter shows that Venus was conjunct the ruler of the 8th house and the 10th house. So there was something connected with status, a feeling of status, power, something like that, connected to his Atmakaraka. And the planet with the second highest degree is the moon in Scorpio, and it's in Jyeshta Nakshatra, and I've mentioned this in the video that I made about serial killers as well. This conjunction, especially moon in Scorpio, this is something that again, I'm not trying to say anybody with this placement is a killer, but moon in Scorpio is debilitated, and in Jyeshta and conjunct Mars, this is a very troubled mind. This is a very aggressive, it shows me somebody who has a lot of pent-up anger right off the bat. And also, I mentioned there are like a connection between poverty and possible turning to murder, especially with these like sexually motivated crimes made by men. And Jyeshta is one of those nakshatras that actually have to do with this feeling of proving yourself, like you feel like you're poor, or there's, even if the person is not literally poor, they just have this inner feeling of inferiority by which they constantly try to grow outwards and to, prove that they are successful in the material world and all this stuff. Again, not every person who has this, I actually know a lot of people who have Jyeshta Nakshatra and they are really decent human beings. But together with other aspects, it can definitely point towards a person who is a little bit unstable. That's to be said. So this is about his natal chart and possible red flags that led to his behavior. And also Chitra, let's not forget, is ruled by Mars. So there's also an element of potential aggression there connected to his Atmakaraka. And his Karakamsha now let's say the D9 chart finally. The D9 chart, you can see that his Atmakaraka Venus sits in the sign of Gemini, conjunct Rahu, I could add. Already you have Rahu there, which shows that, that's the master trickster, the master illusion maker, and it's already a little bit of a malefic influence. And so the Atmakaraka, so the Karakamsha is Gemini, right? The third house from the Karakamsha is Leo. Now, the third house is empty. Leo in itself is not a very malefic influence. But it's not a very malefic, but it does show like an inner harshness. And let's see what else. Let me think. Right, another thing that I have noticed is Saturn is aspecting the third. So Saturn, as you can see in the chart, is in Scorpio. And Saturn aspects the first, the third, the 7th, and the 10th houses from itself. So by 10th aspect, Saturn is also aspecting the third house from the Karakamsha, which is Leo. So there is that as a malefic. And let's see, Mars, any aspect for Mars? Oh yeah. And Mars is also aspecting the because Mars is sitting in Capricorn, as you can see there. And by 7th aspect, it will aspect Cancer, and then it will aspect Leo by 8th aspect. So you have two malefics aspecting the third house from the Karakamsha, and one malefic sitting in the Karakamsha. Already overwhelming influence. Now, you also have Moon in Aquarius opposite. So the Moon is also aspecting the third house from the Karakamsha. But this doesn't mean that it can overpower the malefics. the malefics are still there. Now, why am I even doing this analysis? Like, normally, let's say if you are having doubts about somebody, like let's say you think somebody may have done something shady, but you have no way to prove it. I would say look at their chart, and if you see malefics on the third of the from the Karakamsha, at least you know that this is somebody who's capable of doing it. So like if I would look at somebody, let's say I'm suspecting somebody, and I look at the third house from their Karakamsha, and I look at their Karakamsha, and I only see benefic planets there, I am very uninclined to say that this person has done something shady. But if I look at the third house from the Karakamsha, and I look at the Karakamsha and it's mostly negative, malefic planets, then I am more likely to say this person has actually done something. This is the way that I use it. And of course, I also mentioned that this is especially important when it comes to politicians and their charts, because that's how you know who you should vote for. Because if you just go by the media, the media is being bought either way, so I won't get into that. So this has been it. This has been my very lengthy video. If you have made it to the end, you deserve a medal. So thank you if you have made it to the end, and of course if you liked it, please like, subscribe, hit the notifications bell, and if you have any suggestions or any requests of any topics that you might want me to cover in future videos, including connected to these topics of Arudha Lagna, Karakamsha, soul purpose, all this stuff, any examples maybe of celebrities or, public figures that you want to see, please comment in the comment section, and like, subscribe, hit the notifications bell, and if you would like to get a personal consultation, please email me at the email address that I will leave in the video description. Thank you.